The 7th floor of Toronto General had a rule nobody wrote down anywhere. You didn't speak unless spoken to, and you definitely didn't ask the Calloway-Reece family why their newborn kept losing weight. Nora Kessler had been a NICU nurse for 6 years, and in that time she'd learned to read incubators the way other people read faces. She knew the particular hush of a baby who was struggling before the monitors caught up to it. So when she looked down at Theo Calloway-Reece, 8 days old, born at 34 weeks, technically stable, technically thriving according to every chart clipped to his bassinet, something in her chest went tight and stayed that way. He wasn't crying enough. Babies that small cried like their lives depended on it, because in a way they did. Theo whimpered, faint and exhausted, like a kid who'd already learned that nobody was coming. "He's down another 40 grams, she said to the attending, a tired man named Dr. Pemberton who'd clearly stopped really looking at numbers 3 patients ago. "Within range," he said, not looking up from his tablet. "Preemies fluctuate. You know that better than anyone, Kessler." She did know that. She also knew that a baby who'd been steadily, quietly losing weight for 4 days straight wasn't fluctuating. He was failing slowly enough that nobody panicked, which was somehow worse, what nobody in scrubs had bothered to explain to her. What she'd had to learn from the security detail loitering by the elevator bank and the hospital gossip that moved faster than any official memo was that Theo's father owned half the shipping containers that came through the port of Montreal, and the other half of his business didn't show up on any manifest at all. Gabriel Calloway-Reece, the kind of man whose name made administrators reroute entire wings. Nora didn't care about any of that. She cared that a baby was disappearing in front of her, ounce by ounce, and everyone with a medical degree kept telling her it was nothing. She started keeping her own notes, not on the chart. On a battered notebook she kept in her scrub pocket, the kind of habit her old mentor in Halifax had drilled into her. Write down what you see, not what you're told to see. Feeding volumes. Diaper output. The exact minute each formula bag was hung, the exact minute it was changed. Patterns had a way of hiding in plain sight if you let other people do your looking for you. By the 3rd night, she had a pattern she didn't like. Theo lost weight fastest on the nights a particular nurse covered the overnight feeds. A contract nurse named Priya Anand, brought in 2 weeks ago through an agency, sweet-faced, always offering to take Nora's shifts off her hands. "Go home, you look exhausted. I've got this one." Nora had said yes more than once, grateful for the kindness. Now she wondered what kindness had been covering for. She didn't accuse anyone. She'd learned that lesson early. A nurse who threw around accusations without proof didn't last long in a hospital that depended on a family like the Calloway-Reeces for half its donor wall. So she did what she did best. She watched. She documented. She started double-checking the feeding bags herself before they went up, scanning barcodes, checking seals, weighing them on the sly before and after. On the 4th night, she caught it. The volume going in didn't match the volume in the bag. Someone was diluting Theo's feeds. Not enough to be obvious on any single shift, just enough to add up to a baby who was starving in increments, invisible to anyone who only checked the numbers once a day. Her hands were shaking when she photographed the bag, the label, the discrepancy in her notebook beside it. She didn't know yet who was responsible or why. She only knew that in the morning she was going to have to say something to someone who could actually do something about it, and that the moment she did, every quiet, comfortable assumption about this hospital was going to break. She didn't expect the first person to hear about it would be the baby's father. Gabriel Calloway-Reece arrived at 6 in the morning, the way certain men arrived everywhere, like the building had been built around the expectation that he would, eventually, walk through it. Tall, dark-haired, dressed for a boardroom even at that hour, with 2 men trailing a careful 3 steps behind him who weren't dressed like hospital visitors at all. He went straight to the NICU window first, the way he always did, just to look at his son for a long moment before he did anything else. Nora had clocked out 20 minutes earlier. She should have gone home. Instead, she found herself standing at the nurse's station, with her notebook in her cardigan pocket, watching him through the glass, trying to decide whether the man who terrified an entire hospital administration was also the kind of man who'd want to know that his son was being quietly poisoned by inches. She decided he was. Whatever else he was, the way he looked at that incubator wasn't a performance. Mr. Calloway-Reece. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Could I have a minute?" He turned, and up close his eyes were the kind of tired that didn't come from one bad night, the kind that came from weeks of watching a child not get better and not knowing why. "You're the one Pemberton complains about," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I take a lot of notes," she said. "Sometimes that bothers people." Something flickered at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "Talk," she told him. "Not everything. Not yet, not standing in a hallway where anyone could be listening, but enough. The discrepancy in the feeding volumes, the pattern tied to the overnight shifts, the photograph on her phone, time-stamped, dated, impossible to argue with." She watched his face change as she spoke, watched the boardroom composure drop away into something much colder and much more focused. "Who?" he said. "Just that. I don't know yet. I have a guess. I don't make accusations on guesses. That's either very principled or very naive, Kessler." He said her name like he'd already memorized her badge. "In my experience, those are usually the same thing. Then it's a good thing I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to let me prove it before anyone tips off whoever's doing this." He studied her for a long moment, the kind of look that made her understand exactly why grown men rerouted hospital wings to avoid crossing him. Then he nodded once, and something in her chest unclenched that she hadn't realized was clenched at all. 24 hours, he said. "Then I handle it myself." She didn't ask what that meant. She had a feeling she didn't want to know, and an even stronger feeling that whatever it was, it would be faster and far less forgiving than a hospital review board. The next 24 hours moved like something underwater. Nora switched her own schedule to cover every feed she could, told the charge nurse she was picking up extra shifts for the money, which wasn't even a lie. She weighed every bag. She watched Priya Anand with a friendliness that cost her more than she wanted to admit, because the woman had brought her coffee twice that week and asked about her mother's hip replacement like she meant it. It was almost worse, finding out people could be kind and still be the reason a baby wasn't crying enough. She caught it on tape, the hospital's own hallway camera, angled just enough to catch Priya at the supply room at 3:30 in the morning, swapping out a sealed feeding bag for one that wasn't sealed at all. Nora didn't confront her. She photographed the footage timestamp, walked straight to the nurse's station, and called the number Gabriel had written on the back of a parking valet ticket, because apparently that was the kind of detail a man like that thought to leave behind. He was there in 11 minutes. She'd later learn he'd been parked outside the hospital the entire night. What happened after that, Nora only understood in pieces, because nobody explained it to her directly, and she was too smart to ask the wrong questions out loud. Priya Anand wasn't an agency nurse at all, not really. Her real employer was a man named Easton Whitlock, a name that made Gabriel's jaw tighten in a way she hadn't seen before, a man who ran a logistics company that competed for the same Port of Montreal contracts Gabriel's family had held for 2 generations. Whitlock hadn't wanted Theo dead exactly. He'd wanted Gabriel distracted, destabilized, vulnerable enough during a custody fight that didn't even exist yet that he'd make a mistake in the boardroom that mattered. A sick child was just leverage. The baby's actual life was incidental to a man who saw children as variables in a business equation. Nora found that harder to forgive than almost anything else in the whole ugly business, that someone could look at Theo's small, failing body and see a spreadsheet line. Security escorted Priya out before the morning shift change. What happened to her after that, Nora genuinely didn't ask, and the look on Gabriel's face when she almost did told her she'd made the right call in staying quiet. Whatever justice existed outside hospital walls wasn't hers to administer or witness. What mattered in the end was simpler than all of it. Theo's feeds went back to full strength that morning. By the end of the week, he'd put back nearly everything he'd lost, and by the time Nora came in for her next overnight shift, His cry had changed. Louder, furious, healthy in the specific way that only sounds beautiful to people who've spent their nights listening for the alternative. Gabriel started showing up earlier than visiting hours technically allowed. Nobody stopped him. Nora noticed he'd started timing his visits to her shifts, though neither of them said so out loud for a long while. He asked about her mother's hip. He brought coffee that was actually good, not vending machine bad. He sat by the incubator some nights and just watched his son breathe, and once, when he thought she wasn't looking, she caught him watching her instead, with an expression that had nothing boardroom about it at all. "You didn't have to keep a notebook," he said one night when the ward was quiet and Theo was finally, blessedly, sleep the regular way babies were supposed to sleep. Most people would have trusted the chart. Most people aren't watching for the thing nobody wants to admit is happening, she said. No, he agreed. Most people aren't. He didn't say anything else that night, but 2 weeks later when Theo was finally cleared to go home, 8 pounds, 4 ounces, screaming his lungs out at the indignity of a car seat, Gabriel found Nora at the nurse's station one last time, off the clock, scrubs traded for her own coat. "I owe you something I can't put in an envelope," he said. "You don't owe me anything. I was doing my job. You were doing the job everyone else stopped doing." He hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, the composure cracked into something almost unguarded. "I'd like to see you again. Not as the man whose son you saved. Just see you, if that's something you'd want." Nora thought about every reason it was a terrible idea. The kind of man he was, the world he came from, the danger that had followed her down a hospital hallway in the form of a sweet-faced nurse with a borrowed badge. She thought about the notebook still in her cardigan pocket, and the months of trusting her own eyes when nobody else would. "I think," she said slowly, "I'd like that, as long as you understand I'll always trust what I see over what I'm told." "Kessler," he said, and for the first time he was almost smiling. "That's exactly why I'm asking.